A sentencing decision in Hong Kong tomorrow could have major implications for the city's pro-democracy movement. Tong Ying-kit was found guilty earlier this week. He is the first person tried under a controversial national security law. In the meantime, dozens have been arrested since Beijing imposed the legislation on the city last summer. Critics say it's part of an effort to stifle freedoms in Hong Kong and tighten the Chinese government's grip on what was considered a semi-autonomous city. Ramy Inocencio is following the story for us and brings us a look at this case. So, Ramy, just walk us through Tong's case. What was he convicted of, and what possible sentence could he face?
Sure. The two charges that he's been found guilty of are secession and terrorism. Now, secession is related basically to separatism. He's found guilty of advocating for the separation of Hong Kong, this special administrative region, from the rest of China, which it officially belongs to. Terrorism is in regards to him driving, allegedly, his motorbike through a group of policemen. A few of them were injured, but none critically. And prosecutors say, actually, that the only person injured was himself, Tong Ying-kit himself, who suffered from a broken bone. As for the sentencing, we're waiting for that, and in less than 24 hours, we are expected to get that. The sentencing could find him in prison from anywhere from several years to the rest of his life in prison.
So he's the first person to be prosecuted under this law. So now we're getting a sense of how Beijing will treat people. Tong was denied bail, and he was denied a jury trial. Instead, a panel of judges chosen by the city's chief executive decided the verdict. What does this tell us about how the city will prosecute national security law charges going forward?
Sure. Harshly, in a word, basically Tong Ying-kit is the canary in the coal mine for a few dozen other people who are currently arrested in prison and waiting for their own trials. But I'm also glad that you brought up the fact that he was denied bail and denied a jury, because that has been a common law tradition, not just for decades, but at least for getting a jury. That hasn't happened in 176 years here in Hong Kong. So the fact that he's the first person will go down, at least in memory, if not history, for that. Of course, this is through the lens of the national security law. And as you also imply, people ahead over the next few months, next year or so, we're going to be seeing more of these cases. And the fact that potentially he could go to prison for life for carrying this flag that had this banner potentially advocating for secession and this accusation of terrorism, it could spell a harsh sentencing, harsh verdicts for more than 60 other people, from journalists, union activists, former legislators, and also lawyers, all waiting in prisons in Hong Kong for their day in court.
Actually, can I ask you about the banner or the flag that he was carrying, the phrase that was on it, and its sort of historical significance?
Yeah, basically, there are 8 Chinese characters on that, and the translation is "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times." Now, I'm saying this to you as a journalist, but if I went out on the street and I said that, people, Hong Kongers, might be concerned that I would be sent to jail if a policeman heard me say that, and if I said that in a way that I might be interpreted as advocating for it, they might potentially arrest me. Now, this is strange, I suppose, coming from the Western point of view, from the U.S. point of view here. It's almost as if I'm trying to imagine, as if, take, for example, you being in New York, Anne-Marie. Let's say you had a flag that's had "Liberate New York, Revolution of Our Times." People might look at you and say, you know what, she's advocating for that, she's allowed to. But if someone did that here, as in the case of Tong Ying-kit, he is now waiting for that sentencing, as we know. But this ultimately goes to a freedom of expression issue, freedom of speech issue, and with a national security law that was put upon Hong Kong as of July 1st of 2020, just a little over a year ago. A lot of people are concerned about their own personal freedoms, not just for freedom of expression, but for their own other liberties that include the ability to vote for people and the independence of the judiciary.
I want to ask you about the sort of on a broader scale. Explain to viewers just how this national security law could impact how Hong Kong is seen on the world stage. I think earlier this week I was reading an article about how the stock market tumbled. It had to do with like private education stocks, but really it was in relation to people being very concerned about this or business people and investors very concerned about this new law. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the wider implications for Hong Kong?
Sure. Well, looking at the American Chamber of Commerce, they have been pretty vocal trying to assuage fears that all will be potentially okay, but as long as you comply with the national security law and that you are aware of the risks. Now, to your point about the stock market, definitely this past week hasn't been a good one up until the past day or so. But I was actually watching the stock market when when the verdict came out for Tong Ying-kit, and that was at 3 p.m. local time, and over the course of about 20 minutes, it fell 2%. It did rebound just a little bit back from that, but people clearly are nervous about the fact that what could happen to Tong could happen to other people. With that said, I think people are still trying to figure out where the lines are with the national security law, what can be said, what can't be said, and at least for American businesses here, they are saying that trying to put a good face forward that everything is going to be okay, but you just have to be fully aware there.
Well, the world has been watching for some time now. I keep saying that to you, Ramy. It doesn't seem to have any sort of impact on the way Beijing is behaving, but really appreciate your coverage. Thank you, Ramy.
Sure, you bet.